Welcome to the English Language Proficiency Assessment recorded module series. This module gives participants an overview of the English learner identification process and outlines the required steps districts must take to ensure all Idaho children enrolled into a public school have access to high-quality educational programming and instruction. The intended audience for this module is district personnel who are responsible for or personnel who would like to know more about Idaho's standardized procedure to identify children eligible for district English language support services. After this presentation, participants will be able to 1. Describe the steps of Idaho's English learner identification process. 2. Explain the role of the home language survey. 3. Identify the appropriate WHEATIS screener and grade level cluster to screen potential English learners. And 4. Participants will be able to describe the necessary steps a district takes after a child completes an English language proficiency screener. The English learner identification process is required by both federal and state law. It is important for a district to set up internal policies and procedures that ensure these mandates are upheld and implemented with fidelity. To meet the obligations under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the Equal Education Opportunities Act, the state and its districts must identify and assess all potential English learner students in a timely, valid, and reliable manner. Under Title I of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act, the Idaho State Board of Education and State Department of Education are obligated to establish and propagate a technically sound state assessment system. The state's assessment system promotes educational excellence and equity so all students master the knowledge and skills necessary to attain college and career success at the time of high school graduation. Coherent and consistent implementation of annual statewide assessments to all students is a requirement in districts under ESSA Section 1111B 2B5. Under the Idaho Administrative Procedure Act, or IDAPA for short, Rule 080203-11103 obligates that all Idaho public school children will participate in Idaho's Comprehensive Assessment Program. This includes the English Language Proficiency Assessment for those who qualify. We will now review the steps districts are required to take to fulfill their obligations under federal and state law. Districts are responsible for creating a uniform enrollment process with elements that include how the district ensures identification of current and potential English learners. The enrollment process must include steps to 1. Verify and confirm whether a child has a current EL status, and/or 2. Whether a student needs to be evaluated for English language support program eligibility. Presented on this slide are the process steps which must be taken to ensure your district is following the state's standardized English learner identification process. The steps outlined here correspond to specific slides within this presentation that give the audience more details of what each action entails. It is important to note here that the identification process must be completed within 30 calendar days of a student's enrollment. Moreover, each child enrolling into Idaho's public school system should be approached with an asset-based lens. This means that every Idaho student should be viewed as a valuable resource that can enhance and support their own and others' learning. Linguistically and culturally diverse learners, in particular, bring a unique set of assets that enrich communities of learning. The first step of the EL identification process is a parent enrolls their child into an Idaho district. During enrollment, the home language survey is used as an objective tool that all parents complete as they enroll their child into a new district. The home language survey asks the parent or guardian to answer 8 questions that inquire about the child's typical language use within the home. The home language survey parent responses are used to identify potential students for English language support services by determining whether the child's primary language is one other than English. If a parent's response only lists English on all 8 questions, the student should not be considered to be a potential English learner. The district will not administer an English language proficiency screener, and there is no other action that the district needs to take for that student. If, however, the home language survey response is given indicating a language other than English, this should be a cue for the staff to investigate further about the student's level of English proficiency. The student should now be considered a potential English learner. This slide lists the 8 required questions that must be a part of the district's home language survey. These questions are: 1. What languages are spoken in the home? 2. What languages does your student speak most often? 3. What languages did your student first learn? 4. Which language does your child speak with you? 5. Which language do you use when speaking with your child? 6. Which language do you want phone calls and letters? 7. What is your relationship to the child? And 8. Is there any additional information you would like the school to know about your child? The next step after a home language survey indicates that another language other than English is present is to check the English Learner Management System to verify that the incoming student does not already have an EL status in Idaho. The English Learner Management System is an application within the Idaho System for Educational Excellence that records and tracks the English learner status of students enrolled in an Idaho public school. Through the use of the Find Child function within the English Learner Management System, district staff check to see whether the student has already been identified within a previous district. Students who have an EL status of L1, LE, or EW are already identified as an English learner. If this is the case, they should be placed into the district's Language Instruction Educational Program. Students will complete the state's English Language Proficiency Summative Assessment, or Access for ELS, during the test window. If a student has an EL status of X1, X2, X3, or X4, or FL, the student has already met the exit criteria to exit from a district's Language Instruction Educational Program. These students do not take the state's English Language Proficiency Summative Assessment, or Access for ELS, during the test window. Students with an SO EL status have already taken the English Language Proficiency Screener and have reached the screen-out criteria. If the student's EL status is blank in the English Learner Management System, districts review the Decision to Assess matrix. The Decision to Assess matrix must be reviewed to determine next steps in how the district should approach potential English learners. District personnel review the parent responses of the first 5 questions of the home language survey to make a determination to screen. For example, if one of the parent responses for questions 2 or 4 indicate a language other than English, this automatically triggers the administration of an English Language Proficiency Screener. Once a determination has been made to screen a potential English learner for program services, the district must ensure that the staff member who will be administering the screener is trained and certified. This slide lists the training courses and certification quizzes required to administer either WIDA Screener for Kindergarten or WIDA Screener Online and WIDA Screener Paper. All training and certification is completed within the WIDA Secure portal, and district personnel must be trained and certified annually between July 1st and June 30th prior to an English Language Proficiency Screener administration. If a screener is administered by someone who is not certified, the results are not valid. After verifying that the test administrator is trained and certified, district staff identify the appropriate screener and test form to administer to the potential English learner. This is dependent on the child's grade and enrolling semester. Idaho has 3 available English Language Proficiency Screeners. These are the WIDA Screener for Kindergarten, the WIDA Screener Online, and the WIDA Screener Paper version. The WIDA Screener for Kindergarten is administered to kindergarten and first semester grade 1 students. Note that students enrolling in the first semester of kindergarten only take the listening and speaking portions. Second semester kindergarten and first semester grade 1 students take all language domains. Second semester grade 1, grade 12 students take the WIDA Screener Online as the default screener. Students taking WIDA Screener online complete all language domains, including reading, writing, listening, and speaking online. WIDA Screener paper may be used to screen second semester grade 1 through grade 12 students with a documented need as an administrative consideration. A paper version of the WIDA Screener can be requested by contacting the Idaho State Department of Education. Districts should consider WIDA Screener for paper if they believe a student will perform better on paper. Examples may be students who are unfamiliar with computer navigation, students who have been or may be identified to have dyslexia, or students with a medical circumstance. Districts must identify the appropriate test form that is appropriate for each student. The following table should be used to identify whether a student will take the previous grade level test form. Students enrolling into their first semester of a new grade level cluster, kindergarten, grade 1, grades 2 through 3, grades 4 through 5, grades 6 through 8, and grades 9 through 12, complete the previous grade level cluster test form. The reason why this is done is to ensure that all content of the screener covers subject and content areas that the student has already been exposed to. For example, a grade 2 student enrolling during the first semester would complete the grade 1 WIDA Screener online test form. Another example is for a grade 9 student enrolling during the first semester would complete the grade 6-8 WIDA Screener online test form. The next step is to administer the English Language Proficiency Screener to the potential English learner. Screeners should be given all in one day. The WIDA Screener for kindergarten is a screener that is given on paper and is administered in a one-on-one testing environment. The screener is scored during testing, and the WIDA Screener for kindergarten scoring calculator is used to convert raw scores into proficiency levels. All WIDA Screener for kindergarten test materials are downloadable via the WIDA Secure Portal. The WIDA Screener Online is administered online via the DRC Insight browser. The listening and reading domains are scored automatically, while the test administrators score the speaking and writing domains via the WIDA Assessment Management System, or WIDA AMS. Score reports for the WIDA Screener Online are also downloaded via WIDA AMS portal. This slide lists the state's screen-out criteria for each of the English Language Proficiency Assessment screeners. Pay close attention to the screen-out criteria associated with the WIDA Screener for kindergarten. The screen-out criteria changes by semester and grade. Based on the results of the screener, the student is either identified or not identified as an English learner. After an English Language Proficiency Screener is administered, the student performance scores must be input into the English Learner Management System. In addition to the screener scores, districts must submit a copy of the Home Language Survey. These elements must be present to save and submit the screener record to the Idaho State Department of Education. Be sure that you have both saved and submitted this information to the Idaho State Department of Education. You will know that you have done this successfully when the English Learner Management System assigns the child an EL status of L1, LE, or SO. Once an English Language Proficiency Screener has been completed and the English Learner Management System has determined an EL status for the child, the parent of the child must be informed of the results. The communication must be provided within 30 days and be in a language that is comprehensible to the parent and includes the following information. 1. The reason for identification of the child as an English learner. 2. The child's level of English language proficiency, how the level was assessed, and the status of the child's academic achievement. 3. The methods of instruction used in the program in which the child is or will be participating. 4. How the program will meet the educational strengths and needs of the child and help the child achieve English language proficiency and meet academic standards. 5. Exit requirements for the program. 6. In the case of a child with a disability, how the program meets annual goals in the child's individualized education program. And 7, information regarding parents' rights to withdraw the child from a program upon their request. The last step is to place the child into the district's language instruction educational program. In Castaneda versus Pickard, the court ruled that it is essential for all educators to adhere to the student's civil rights to an education by using the standards established by the three-pronged ruling that language program be 1. Based on sound educational theory, 2. Implemented effectively with adequate personnel and resources, and 3. Evaluated and proven to be effective that alternative research-based improvements must be made when it is found not to be effective. These rulings were affirmed in 2015 when the U.S. Department of Education and Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Civil Rights wrote a letter to the state and local education agencies outlining the importance of the regulations and our obligations to adhere to these with our nation's English learners. The Dear Colleague letter is a great resource for districts to understand their responsibilities and obligations. Once identified as an English learner, all ELs with an EL status of L1, LE, or EW must complete the state's English Language Proficiency Summative Assessment, or WIDA Access, during the English Language Proficiency Assessment test window annually. This slide lists some important reminders that are pertinent to the EL identification process. 1. Annual training and certification to administer WIDA Screener is completed within the WIDA Secure portal. 2. If administering WIDA Screener online, technology components and configurations must be done prior to the online administration. 3. WIDA Screener assessment supports and accommodations are available on all WIDA Screeners. Staff should reference the Accessibility and Accommodations Manual for further details. And as a reminder, accommodations are only available for students with an IEP or 504 plan. 4. Screener results and home language surveys must be input into the English Learner Management System after the screener is complete. 5. Students coming from another WIDA member state may already qualify for services if their cumulative file has WIDA Screener scores. 6. All testing materials must be kept secure at all times. This slide lists some further resources to assist you in the EL identification process. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to the Idaho State Department of Education.